UNO has always been an expanding university, constantly moving forward. But as we move forward, we must also look back to where we began. Let's go back in time with the people who remember UNO the way it was. Join us for Reflections in Time.
It's a beautiful early fall day, September of 1990, and I, along with a fine student crew, are assembled in a beautiful room in the Health, Physical Education and Recreation Building, one of the newer buildings here on our campus, UNO, and I'm about to start what amounts to the 66th in our series of what we call Reflections in Time. Over the past number of years, I've had a real privilege to visit with friends and colleagues of years gone by, men and women who've spent much of their working lives here at UNO, and to talk with them about their contributions, their feelings about things that have happened, people, in effect, as I've said, their reflections in time. And today is no exception. My friend and colleague for many years, Dr. Robert Ruetz, who is with us, a member of our faculty and has been for lots of years. How many has it been, Bob?
25 years, Paul, as of this past August.
Well, and now it's putting the feet up and relaxing and being retired.
Well, I'm wondering if I'm really retired right now. I have so many things going outside of my activities that I had last year here at the university, doing some radio work with KIWR and writing reviews, and I'm also serving as a special assistant to the Dean of Fine Arts. So I'm essentially retired, but not retired.
Sounds as though you enjoy it, though.
I really am. I don't know whether I could ever really retire as such. And
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Let's go back in history, though, Bob. I've known you for a lot of the years that you've been here, and we've worked together on some other things over the years. But I don't know that I ever asked you, Bob, where you came from, your home and your family and your beginnings. Talk a little about that, if you would, as we start to reflect here.
Although we've been in Nebraska 25 years, I'm not a native Nebraskan. I originally come from Wisconsin. I was born in Racine, just south of Milwaukee.
I was born in Madison.
Are you from Madison?
Kindred souls.
Oh, well, wonderful. We're Badgers together.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. This was 1928. I'll give my age here.
They can figure it out as
I'm
they
sure
watch
they
the
can
tape.
if they use a little mathematics. But at the same time, at the age of 2, my parents moved to South Bend, Indiana, in which I spent most of my life. And my schooling was in South Bend, including 4 years at Notre Dame, where I graduated in 1950. My father had what we called a shirt business. He had the Racine Shirt Company, which he moved from Racine, Wisconsin to South Bend, Indiana. And he had his office there with the plant in southern Indiana and Greensburg, Indiana. So I traveled quite a bit with my father on his trips between South Bend and Greensburg, which lies between Cincinnati and Indianapolis.
He made shirts?
They made work shirts. They had contracts with Sears, with J.C. Penney. He has told stories about J.C. Penney, for example. He mentioned what a shyster he was. He had to go to New York to sign contracts with the old man in his offices in New York City.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So,
sounded like you had a pleasant and enjoyable young life. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have 6 brothers and sisters. Actually, 4 brothers, 2 sisters, and then during the Depression, one of my relatives, the 2 parents died within a very short time of each other, and they left a family of 5. So the relation decided to split the family up among the relation, and my father took in 3.
Oh my.
So we had 7 of our own plus 3 is 10. We had 10 in our family,
a big breakfast table.
Right. 2 of those became clergy. One was a priest in South Dakota, and another is still living, and she is a nun in Wisconsin.
Is that right?
And the other was married and had 13 children.
Wow.
So it's quite a family.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in a big family? What were some of the things that were nice and some of the things that maybe weren't quite what you'd want?
Well, I think one of the things that you find in a big family is competition for the food on the table.
Yeah.
I lived during the Great Depression, and my father really had to scratch to make ends meet during that period. And so we were in competition with each other. I had hand-me-down clothes from my brother who couldn't afford getting new clothes. So I lived with that, and I managed to go along with that. My brothers and sisters did too. I thought in our family we all got along very well. I know we had our moments of anger and so forth, but even to this day there is no animosity among any of the children in the family. There was always a hot discussion at the dinner table on some topic or another. My father was a staunch Democrat initially. He had voted for Roosevelt on 2 occasions. And then when the whole thing began to unravel in Washington, he became a Republican, and he was anti-Democrat from that point on. So politics seemed to rule the table conversation.
Did he lead the discussion?
He led, and he also participated very vigorously.
Sounds like a fun group to be a part of.
Another nice thing, I had a brother who was a football player at Notre Dame. He was an All-American in he graduated in 1938.
Oh.
So my father took a great deal of pride in him, and we all did. In fact, when we could get near my brother wherever he was, we did that. We made a big point about him being our brother. I still do to this day. Joe is the immediate past athletic director at Stanford. He's now retired, living on the Stanford campus. They have a home there. So
another great school.
Oh yes, a great school. Yeah. He loved Stanford, although he was a Notre Dame grad.
And a Notre Dame grad is Notre Dame forever.
That's right.
Now, that sounds like an interesting, fun beginning. When did you had a brother who went into athletic directing and football playing, and a nun in the group, and all these things. You ended up in music. When did, if you can think back, when did you really get started in going in that direction?
I think it started in grade school. I went to St. Joseph Grade School in South Bend, and they had a boys' choir, and I began singing in the boys' choir. And they noticed that I apparently had a little talent with my voice, and I was encouraged to take some voice lessons. So I took voice lessons with the organist in the church and began doing some solo work with the choir. In fact, one of the things that I sang at as a solo at church was an evening service with what they called benediction. I think that's what it was called in the Catholic Church in those days. It was an evening service for the parishioners, and at the very end, the pastor turned the lights down, and you saw only the candles burning in the church. And from the loft where the choir is, you'd hear this angelic voice soprano singing, "Good night, sweet Jesus."
And
that's
beautiful.
what I say. Yes.
Yeah,
well, I look back at it today, and it seemed to be very saccharine. Or seems very saccharine today.
Yeah, but very appropriate then.
Yes, that's right.
Now, you had a happy home life. You grew up in a nice family, and you went to the normal schools, a Catholic school, and another one for your undergraduate work. How about music at Notre Dame? How did that fit together?
Well, my father was in business, and he wanted me, as he wanted all of his sons, to follow him into the business.
Sure.
So I originally enrolled in business administration at Notre Dame, and I was there registering one day, and one of the former choir directors at the church came up to me. He was going to school at the time. He had just gotten out of the Army, had been in Patton's tank division in the Second World War, and he said, "You know, you ought to be in music, Bob. Why don't you consider just shifting over to music?" Well, I didn't think very long, because I immediately changed my whole registration within a day into the Arts and Sciences program. They did not have specifically a music degree, a Bachelor of Music. It was an Arts and Science degree with a music major.
What did Dad think about this?
He was not pleased. He was very upset with that. And so I went along with my convictions on that and got my degree from Notre Dame in 1950.
Oh, yeah.
And at that point, Uncle Sam intervened.
Oh, it's about time for the Korean War,
well,
isn't it?
It was a draft, yes. I had been drafted in the Second World War at the very end, and had passed a physical, was to be inducted, but just before, about a week before the induction date, they canceled the draft, so I didn't have to go.
Oh, that was
so
great
I went to
timing.
school for 4 years, and the first one they picked on as the Korean War broke out was me and my brother Ed.
You had a sabbatical between service life
That's
at either
right.
end.
So I was drafted into the National Guard Division, the 45th Division out of Oklahoma, and we spent 6 months at Fort Polk, and then were transported by troop ship from New Orleans through the Panama Canals up to San Francisco and then over to Japan.
All by ship?
By ship. A whole month at sea, 6,000 men. And we landed in Japan and trained.
Sounds like a great trip.
Well, it was memorable.
Yeah.
We trained in the mountains in Hokkaido, the northern island, from April until November, when rumors began to fly that we were headed for Korea. And sure enough, that's what happened. They shipped us to Korea. We landed in Incheon in December of '51 and relieved the 1st Cavalry Division on the front line a short time after that. So I spent about 9 additional months then in Korea.
How was it up on the line in those days?
Well, at that time, the battle had stabilized itself. This was right just after Heartbreak Ridge and all of those horrendous, bloody battles. And there was a stabilization of the line. That didn't mean there wasn't any hot warfare going on, because patrols were sent out every night, and there was contact with the North Koreans, and I lost quite a few friends.
Sure.
But it was not of the same magnitude as had been earlier. And we were leading actually toward a truce and a ceasefire.
And you were there till that occurred, huh?
Well, no, I rotated home just before that. I rotated home in August of '52, and I'm not sure when the ceasefire came about, but it wasn't too much farther after that.
Well, I imagine music sort of was put on hold during that time, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, that's right, absolutely. And even when I got out of the service, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a music degree or a liberal arts degree, so my father said, well, you ought to try to get into the business world.
He's still trying.
He's still trying, and he was successful because I got a job as a cost accountant and office manager of the Bike Web Company, and they happened to make the famous bike athletic supporters.
Oh, yeah.
So I had an office staff under me, and we had a number of women on the staff, and of course they knew all of the intricacies of athletic supporters, every one that the bike company made, and they had them on their desks and so forth.
Interesting place to work.
That's right. So actually this company was a subsidiary of Bauer & Black out of Chicago. So I was with them 2 years and finally decided that I wanted to go back into music. So I quit that position and then went on to Cincinnati and got my master's degree in
the
music.
university there.
University of Cincinnati, College Conservatory of Music.
Fine music school.
Tremendous school, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to visit there, and I was impressed many years ago.
Cincinnati is such a cultural town, such a fine music town. And it was, the atmosphere was so much different than Notre Dame in music because it was really a conservatory atmosphere.
It was music.
It was
all
music
around.
and performance. And I had planned to be a performer until I was there 1 year and decided that there were bigger things than performing, and teaching, college teaching, seemed to be of great interest to me.
Did any of your teachers, your professors, influence you in that way? Did you have any role models you kind of enjoyed and wanted to work toward?
Yes, they did not influence me directly. In an indirect way, I noticed. The thing that struck me, I believe, after the first year of working on a master's degree was the enormous amount of knowledge available to people. And I wanted to partake of that. I wanted to learn more about music, and I thought going into performance might narrow the horizons. And college teaching seemed to be a very palatable area at that time. So I got my master's degree from there and performed at the same time. I performed a number of operatic roles in Cincinnati and sang with the Cincinnati Summer Opera, and then went on to Indiana.
Is this when you started to develop your love of opera?
Yes, exactly. I had been at Notre Dame, I'd been in some musicals and operettas, a couple of Gilbert Sullivan operettas and a student musical. But as far as being in a full-blown opera, I'd never been in an opera until I was in Cincinnati, and I sang a role in Manuel de Falla's La Vida Breve, the role of Paco, this fellow's a jerk. I mean, he drives a young girl to suicide, but she gets back at him by stabbing herself right in front of him at a big party. So she gets her revenge.
Wow.
And then the role of Rodolfo in La Boheme, sang that role in Cincinnati.
Well, this gave you a taste of it then.
Yes. Then some more operatic singing came along when I went to Indiana University to work on a doctorate.
Well, you went right over to Indiana?
Yes, I went immediately to Indiana. In the interim, got married.
I was going to ask you about family here.
While in Cincinnati, I ran into this, well, I had, before Cincinnati, I had some unfortunate love affairs. You know how that is.
Yeah.
A few engagements along the way and then split.
Yeah.
And I became a bitter old man, and I said to myself,
never.
No more women. I'm going to have a good time. I'm not going to have anything. I'm going to date everyone who comes along. And I did that until my wife came along, and she happened to be a Frenchman, or Frenchwoman.
Mm-hmm.
Her maiden name was Pierrette de Repensigny. She's from Montreal. And I fell head over heels.
That did it.
That did it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very rapid love affair, engagement, and marriage.
Marvelous. I've always been afraid to pronounce your wife's name. Do it again. Your first
Pierrette.
name. Pierrette.
Or Pierrette.
Yes, Pierrette.
It's Pierre with the TTE on Pierre,
the end.
Pierrette. Mm-hmm.
So when you went to Indiana, you were a man with more responsibility now. You had a wife.
That's right. And it was a short time after that, I think a year later, we found that my wife was pregnant with our first child, a daughter, Denise.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there 2 years, finished all of the necessary work, but did not finish the complete work for the doctorate, meaning the dissertation. I had completed my exams and so forth, but needed a job. And at that point, I interviewed for a number of positions. I had a chance to go to NYU, and in fact was accepted there on the faculty, but I had second thoughts because of the Washington Square area. I didn't know. I had doubts about living in Washington Square, New York City with a family.
It's historic, but I wouldn't want to live there necessarily, huh?
No, and when you look at the city today, apparently that's a very bad district. So I told Pierrette, we'll wait for a little better situation, probably in the Midwest area. I had a chance to go to Tuscaloosa, University of Alabama, and I turned that down. And ended up at Southwest Missouri State University in Springfield.
Oh, now you're getting closer to Omaha.
Yes, it was the best decision I made. Excuse me, Paul, I'm wrong. Senility, latent senility has set in.
It's hard to get.
I'm a little ahead of myself here because leaving Indiana, I went back to Cincinnati for a summer.
Oh, did you?
And then took a position at a small liberal arts college in Tulsa, Oklahoma. At Benedictine Heights College, which eventually folded because of financial reasons. So I was there 2 years. But those 2 years were crucial because they got me involved in a professional way with an opera company. I was chosen to be the chorus master of Tulsa Opera Company. And I spent 2 years as their chorus master and came in contact with some tremendous singers like Leonard Warren, U.C. Björling. Both of these great singers are passed now. They have died. Gene Madera, Nicola Moscona, an old conductor from the Met, Giuseppe Bambushek, Renato Cellini. Bambushek, incidentally, was conductor when Caruso was at the Met, of all things. So,
wow, that was a great couple of years.
It was a tremendous couple of years, just associating with those people and working with some real professionals while I was teaching. So, gave me a little more experience in the professional world of opera. And following Tulsa, I went back to Indiana, to Bloomington, for 1 more year to complete my dissertation, which I did.
So you finished the whole bit?
Yeah. And then after that year, I took another position then in Springfield. So we really moved down the road a bit from Tulsa to Springfield. Tulsa and Springfield are very close to each other. Springfield is in southwest corner of Missouri. And then in Springfield, I developed the opera program. I was the founding director of their opera workshop. And those were exciting years. I never want to trade those 4 years at Springfield. They were great.
Starting something new.
Yes, that's right. And I think the the whole ambiance of in the academic world at that time was one of great hope. There was very little pessimism. Today, I think there's a lot of pessimism that seems to circulate through the academic world. But in those days, everything was upbeat, and John Kennedy had just been elected president. And
we're talking now about the early 60s.
The early 60s, yes. And the world was wide open to a young person going into teaching. You had a great deal of flexibility. I had the support of the administration. In fact, for the very first opera production we did a production of Henry Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, one of the great works from 1692, but we needed a harpsichord for the production. And the university did not have a harpsichord. So I went to the administration, and the administration at that time happened to be the president, Leland Trawick. We'll get to him later.
Oh, yes.
He used to be the former president here at UNO.
Yes, that's right.
And his chief executive officer was David Scott. Dave was the head of public administration over in the College of Public Affairs and Community Service.
Here for many years. Yeah.
He was also the former mayor of Springfield, but Dave was the executive officer in charge of the budget. So I paid a visit with the department chairman for music with Dave and presented my plan. I had come up with the possibility of buying a harpsichord from the harpsichord instructor at Hastings College in Nebraska. He was moving to the Netherlands for 2 years, and he was going to sell one of his 2 harpsichords for $500. It was a Sperhawk. Beautiful instrument, 1 year old.
Oh my.
And Dave said, didn't blink an eye, he said, we'll buy it. So we went ahead and bought it, and the department chairman blinked his eyes because he couldn't believe that money was being released by the administration for something as frivolous as a harpsichord.
Well, frivolous or not, your timing was great.
It was. I went in with such confidence, and I just knew we were going to get it. And and we did receive this harpsichord, which saved our production.
Now, you enjoyed your years there, but then you moved on. What was the next move?
Well, the next move was UNO. Actually, it was OU at that time, University of Omaha.
Yeah. What surfaced to get you up in this direction? Didn't sound like you were acquainted with the area or the school.
I became a bitter faculty member for the first time in my life at SMS.
Oh.
The Board of Trustees had fired the president, Leland Trawick, and so they had split the faculty. Actually, the whole situation split the faculty into 2 groups: the fors, Trawicks, and the against Trawicks. And I liked Leland Trawick. He had really transformed that institution in 4 years. The faculty elected me as one of the representatives on a search committee with the Board of Trustees. We were going to select the next president. And we worked very diligently a whole summer reviewing credentials. You know, you've been through all of this, Paul, at one time or another, reviewing credentials and having interviews and so forth. And we found out after the fact that the Board of Trustees had already chosen its candidate, who was not even on the list. And I really became very upset, and I said, I don't want any more of this institution. I had tenure. I could have stayed there much longer, but I decided I was going to leave, and after 4 years. So as it turned out, and ironically, Leland Trawick applied for the presidency here at UNO, or at OU.
You sent your resumes at the same time?
Mabel L. Well, actually, he was here 1 year before I came here. So he was accepted while I was a faculty member at SMS in Springfield. I recall he had come up for an interview to OU with the Board of Regents or Board of Trustees at that time, I believe it was. Yeah. And we met him at the airport in Springfield on his return trip, and he described the Omaha campus. He said it was beautiful. He said it's in such a beautiful parkland-like area. You couldn't imagine the beauty of the place. And so then he went on to OU as its president. He was accepted here. And the next year I decided to leave and had applied at Northern Illinois University, had a possibility there, but it was going to be a new position, and the Board of the legislature had not approved the position as yet budgetarily. So I came up for an interview to OU, and Jim Peterson, my dear colleague who just died this past February, God rest his soul, met me down at the old Fontanelle Hotel after I flew in from Springfield, took me out to the campus, and I performed for the faculty, in fact, right over there to my left. As I look out the window here.
The old music shack.
The old music shack was attached right to the south end of the field house.
Right,
yes.
right.
In fact, I can see my office from here. It's right on that sidewalk out there.
You have a great imagination and memory.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that building well.
And we had a reception in the student center. But I think what impressed me about the university was not only the beautiful area in which it was located, but the cleanliness of the campus. It is, and the beauty of the architecture. I mean, has such continuity architecturally.
Yes.
And I liked the faculty. I really did. I liked the people that I met. So I decided to come here and accepted the position.
And you came here then in what year would it have been?
1965.
Yeah.
I felt the position, though, was really a step down for me, because we had a brand new building in Springfield. They had a larger faculty. They did not have a master's program, nor did they have a master's program here at the time.
No.
But I decided to take a chance and risk it and come here, and I never regret it.
Now, the program in music, as you came here in the mid-'60s, what generally was it like?
It was a very compact program. I think the faculty, first of all, was excellent. In each field, there were excellent faculty members, but there were not that many faculty members involved. And the program, of course, was quite delimited as a result of that. So it was a small program. The students, we had some excellent music students. We had some poor students also, but I thought the quality was quite good. Compared to the quality today, I think we've come up quite a few notches in quality of student over the past few years.
And of course, during those years too that you've been here, since the mid-'60s, there have been a lot of changes personnel-wise, additions and expansion and new programs. And tell us a little about the development of the program as you remember it.
Well, number one, if we look back at the old building, I recall that very vividly because it was cold in the winter and hot in the summer in that building.
Bad place to be in a hailstorm.
Oh, that's right, exactly. You heard the hail and the rain on the top of the roof. If you were giving a voice lesson, you couldn't tell whether the student had a rattle in the throat or whether it was a singing tone. But and the acoustics of the rooms were terrible. You heard noise coming in from all sides. So it was very difficult to teach. Yet we did everything in that building. One of the practice rooms, and in fact I believe the Gateway had advertised this on the front page when we were trying to sell the new building to the Nebraska legislature. They showed a student with a tuba practicing sitting on the toilet in the men's room. It had a single facility. And it's true, the students had to go in there to practice. We had no practice facilities sufficient for them.
Well, the Regents got the message finally.
Thanks to Terry Carpenter.
Yeah, and we had what was many of us remember as a rather traumatic time, the merger of the university. You got here just in time for that, didn't you?
Oh, yes, 1968, I recall that.
Yeah. Now, you hadn't been here many years, Bob, when that was effective, and you had colleagues around you that had been here a long time. Sort of, how did it appear to you? What did you think of the merger of our University of Omaha into the Nebraska system?
I felt it was a good thing for the state of Nebraska and for the city. First of all, it allowed, believe it or not, a larger budget for the university and an expansion of programs. Some older faculty members who had been here some time, of course, I'm sure may not have been in favor of this because they would have seen the loss of flexibility in their programs and so forth, being tied in to the other programs in the system. But I thought it was a very positive step forward.
It was a rapid one, too, as we remember. It
happened
quickly. In a hurry.
Yes.
You mentioned Terry Carpenter, and he helped effect it, didn't he?
It really saved, I think it really saved the university. This university, I believe, was on the verge of closing.
Well, we'd had 2 votes on the mill levy.
That's right.
One while you were here, probably, and they didn't pass.
No.
To increase the local support.
That's right.
So it happened. So, and I'm interested in getting opinions like yours because it varies from person to person.
Yeah.
But as the years have gone on, I think there would be a consensus almost that it turned out to be a good thing?
It was a good thing. The university is still the stepchild of Lincoln. No matter what people say in the press or otherwise, we are still not getting the appropriate funding for the university that we should compared with the Lincoln campus, but I am confident that will come.
Now, in all these years of teaching, and I know we've mentioned, at least in passing, your love of opera and involvement in that in other schools, what were the main things you taught here? What was your main focus in teaching in all these years, Bob?
Well, my main focus was voice, teaching voice, developing an opera program. I taught voice literature. I did some choral work. I have taught some general music courses such as masterpieces of musical theater, history of opera, courses such as that. Mm-hmm. And the very first year I came, I taught theory. Jim Peterson needed somebody to teach ear training and sight singing, and of course I was the logical one to do it, being a new faculty member. Sure. Sure. So he put me in that position, but eventually rotated me out of that after about 1.5 to 2 years. That is not my area, though, of expertise.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Now, you've had opportunity to teach, and we'll get to it a little later, to do some administrative work, too, along the line. But as you think back over the years, Bob, you've touched the lives of lots of students, many students. And I was wondering if a student of the 60s and the 70s and maybe the late 50s even, are they all alike? Or did you notice generally student body makeups at a small school being different than a large one? What are your feelings about that?
Well, I think if we compare the motivation of students in the 60s when I came and the motivation of the students today, I think students are much more highly motivated today.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure what the reason is, but I certainly relish having students with that kind of motivation in class who really want to better themselves. When I first came here, maybe I can come up with an answer in a bit to that question, but when I came here, some students wouldn't think twice of missing a lesson and not contacting the instructor, or missing a class and not contacting the instructor. Today, students want to make sure that they get in every lesson that they have paid for. I think there's an economic thing tied into this too, and that they get every ounce of instruction for the dollar they're paying. They are investing in their future. And I think they're understanding, the students are understanding this. But I've had some wonderful students in the last, well, since I came out of administration, I've come across so many fine students here at this university. I'm very proud of them.
I wondered, in the music programs that you've been a part of at this school and other places, if you notice a difference in the quality of the student between a live-in campus and the kind we have, which has been a commuter campus all these years. Does that make any difference?
I think it makes a difference in the spirit that one sees on campus. We have a short-lived spirit here on this campus. It lasts from about 7 in the morning till about 5 in the evening.
Yeah.
From Monday till Friday. We do have people attending football games, but it is not the same kind of spirit that one would have if you had dormitories on campus, where people are here constantly. This is their home.
And now, as we're talking, they're thinking about that very heavily for our campus in the years to come, and we'll probably see it.
And our campus is a non-traditional campus, meaning that we have quite a few students working. They're working and going to school. They need to do that to pay their way through school. So they have to split their allegiance between two forces here, and that, I think, that cuts back on the this kind of campus spirit that we like to see. But the spirit has improved, I believe, here at UNO.
One thing that's certainly changed in the years, especially since the merger, is this physical appearance of the campus.
Oh, yes.
What was the campus like when you came? It had just a few major areas, didn't it?
The field house, the metal hut, the engineering building stood out like the proverbial sore thumb.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful building, but it just was in the middle of nowhere. The Arts and Sciences building, which was then the administration building, and then the student center, and I think that's all we had. We had a beautiful baseball field just to the west of this
building.
Almost
where we're sitting.
That's right. A beautiful field, and of course they eventually tore that up and put this building in. So it was a small campus. I look at it today, and it has, the beauty of the campus has improved so greatly, thanks partly to Jim Vega and his fine groundskeepers.
Yes, he's a marvel.
They've done a great job here. But the campus has expanded, and it really looks like a university campus now.
And perhaps in line with what you said a moment ago, that's one reason for improvements in spirit. The physical aspects of the campus, the ambience makes a difference too.
That's right. It does. It improves everyone's spirit. It makes you feel good about what you're doing here.
But I think you'll agree with me too, Bob, along this line, that the thing that really improves one's spirit, interest in learning, that sort of thing, are those people who you touch base with as your faculty.
Yes.
And I was wondering, in your own life, personally, very personally, what are some of the keys that you feel are a part of being a great teacher, a good teacher, a sound teacher?
Well, in my own teaching, I've learned over the years that preparation is key. That's number one. If you go into any class, you must be prepared. And that means to try to cover every angle of the topic that you're discussing for that particular day, or being sure that you are prepared with the material that you're going to work with if a student comes in to learn a song or whatever. Students are pretty sharp. They know if the instructor is bluffing or not, and you've got to have all the facts and all of the information at hand. Not that you're going to use it all in class, but it's available. You're there to help to guide the students along in their own learning process. Enthusiasm is another thing. I know that over the last 5 years I have learned that getting here at 7 o'clock in the morning for a 9 o'clock class is important to me, because I have to get myself up psychologically, emotionally. Before I enter a class, I don't want to enter a class with my eyes drooping and my shirt tail hanging out and papers hanging out of a book bag. I want to go in perky and upbeat and ready to go. So those are at least two ingredients that I have found.
One of the other things that we ought to touch on too, you haven't spent all your academic life here on campus as a teacher. You've done some administrating too.
That's right.
Tell us a little about that and how you liked it.
It was, well, one of the great people that I came in contact with was Jerry Birdman. Jerry Birdman was the first formal dean of the College of Fine Arts, and I think he joined us back in 1973. And at that time, I had some run-ins with our music administration and with our upper administration. I think Vic Blackwell, who was the Dean of Arts and Sciences, and Jim Peterson and I really didn't hit it off at that time. We had some real clashes over the opera program, and all of that is by the boards. We're good friends, or we were good friends up until last week, that I know of. But let's see if I can remember where I am here.
No, the transition into administration.
Oh yeah, into administration. So when Jerry Birdman came in as the new dean, I was very cynical and skeptical that things were going to work out. You know how it is when that old bitterness sets in.
Yeah.
One should never be bitter. So I met with Dean Birdman, and as he met with each faculty member to introduce himself. And apparently something must have rubbed off right with him about me, because it was a year later that he asked me if I would join him as assistant dean in the College of Fine Arts office. And it was a new experience for me, and I thought, sure, it'll be a little break from teaching for me, and it'll provide a whole new vista. So I went into the College of Fine Arts office, and Jerry was in that office 2 years and then left to take the deanship in University of Connecticut, which elevated me to acting dean of the college. I had not anticipated that. And I think during that 1 year it was a horrendous year because I think I had 3 major student grievances that were left over from the past administration I had to deal with. That was one thing that was very debilitating. I had 2 new department chairmen that had not worked with the previous dean at all, and I had to break them in, so to speak, and I was a brand new dean as such. I was not used to running the whole show. So it was a very rough year, and I think I came out with a few shakes, musical shakes. But they selected another dean for the position in the following year, Murray North, who took over. He was here a couple of years, but I continued then as his assistant dean. I felt a little better in an assisting capacity than in the upper capacity.
Well, now, you'd been away from teaching for a while. Did you sort of get a yen to go back to the classroom a little more?
I did, yes. And it was what really triggered this. Going back into the classroom occurred when we had a big budget crunch back in 1983. At that point, I decided I'd had enough of administration. I'd been in, 7 or 8 years, and that it was a good time to go back into teaching. But that was not, that was just before I had one major project in the dean's office that I enjoyed immensely, and that was handling the residency of our visiting professor from London, Brian Way. In fact, you interviewed Brian a few years ago. And coordinated his visits around the state and around the community, his workshops in interdisciplinary arts, his children's theater group, which he formed, which we took around to elementary schools, I think of 25 elementary schools in this area.
Is that right?
And his Shakespeare readings. It was a great year, a nice year to go out on. So then I went back into teaching the very next year. This was about 1983, took a 1-year sabbatical. Had a nice research project that I dealt with.
What did you do?
Well, it was a development of a new edition of an opera from the year 1730. The title of the opera was Croesus by Reinhard Kaiser, who was a contemporary of Handel. And so I don't want to get into that because that's a story all its own, involving the attainment or the acquirement of the acquiring of the original manuscript and a microfilm from a library in Krakow, Poland.
Is that right?
It was a very complex thing, very exciting.
Sounds like a good year.
Quite a story.
And a change.
Yeah. But it was a neat time for me. And then I went back into teaching, teaching voice and voice literature and masterpiece of musical theater, music appreciation, and enjoyed it immensely. The thing that I liked about this new turn in teaching, though, Paul, was the fact that I was teaching courses that involved students outside of music, students from arts and sciences, from engineering and other areas.
It's nice to get involved with the rest of the campus, isn't it?
And there were some terrific students that I came in contact with. I cherish them.
You cherish them, and I'm quite sure also, Bob, you cherish a lot of people. You, on the faculty and the staff. And one thing we have done on many of these tapes that I've been making in the area of reflections have been to ask people like you and I ask you, the people that stand out in memory, campus mainly or any place, people that have meant a lot to you personally.
Here on the UNO campus.
Let's take it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think Jim Peterson, number one. We had our battles, some bloody battles, but he and I became good friends in the last years after he had retired. And in fact, just a couple of months before he died last February, as I did yearly, I kidded him quite a bit. He ran the record library in the music department. And I went in there every morning to check out records for my classes. And every semester there was a discussion of rock musicals and rock opera. And if there's one thing that Jim Peterson hated, it was rock music, rock and roll. And I took out the recording of Hair and I said, Jim, just want you to know that today is the day that I'm going to discuss your favorite musical. And you could see him becoming very flush. So I would kid him every year, and I did that in December.
Yeah, he was
and his reaction was the same.
Interesting man.
He really was a very interesting guy. And he had quite an impact on this campus.
Yes, indeed.
But I loved his sense of humor. He had a very dry sense of humor, but very poignant and very pointed, I should say, instead of poignant, very pointed.
Other colleagues, other people, other departments, people that just pop into your mind?
Well, Jack Newton in Arts and Sciences, the Dean of Arts and Sciences, he and I have become very good friends. We've socialized a lot. We've gone to operas together. He's a great opera lover. Bob Runyon in the library is a good friend of mine. I'm trying to think out of the past. Ed Clark and I were not the best of friends because there's a great competition between opera and musical theater, and Ed Clark was noted for his musical theater work here on campus. But he and I accommodated each other fairly well toward the end. Jack Brillhart is another one who is now retired, living in the Springfield area, but Jack was in your area.
Yes.
There are a number of people. I mean, I could go on and on. At my retirement reception, just the people who attended were, I mean, many of my friends were there. Elvira Garcia, Bob Welk from theater, all of my colleagues in the fine arts, Kermit Peters for music.
One thing I was going to ask you, it crossed my mind as you were talking about the department, and then we drifted into the college. The College of Fine Arts came into being during your time here.
Yes.
And I wondered if that created any conflicts or problems as you melded those groups together. Music was not by itself, nor was theater. It left arts and science, and so on. There was a marriage of a variety of groups here, all in the arts field, certainly, but...
It created some problems. I think it created problems first with the College of Arts and Sciences, because if you were at that meeting a few years ago, the faculty voted not necessarily to break these areas away from arts and sciences, but to have a separate school set up as part of arts and sciences. And so the chancellor, who was then Ronald Roskins, unilaterally tore the whole unit away as a separate entity. I think there is always competition between the various departments, theater, art, and music in particular, for funds. But at the same time, I think the relationship between the faculty members has been very good. Ever since I've been in the college, I've noticed that relationship improve, and it's even gotten stronger. And with the new Fine Arts building coming up in 2 years, it's going to change dramatically, I think, the entire image of this campus as far as fine arts is concerned.
Just like the music building changed the program generally so much in a physical way, that building will have a tremendous impact, too, on so many areas.
That's right. On all areas, and not necessarily of fine arts, but all areas of the campus. Right.
Well,
I should mention that you're a good friend of mine from the faculty, a very good friend of mine, one that I'll cherish for many years.
Well, we hope we can have many chats like this in the years to come as we reflect on things past, and also the university as it grows and changes.
That's right.
It has changed a lot, though, in 25 years.
Has.
Isn't it funny when you look around, you can't remember what it was like when we didn't have all these buildings. When they once get in place, they sort of belong there.
That's right. I go to the library now, and I remember having to pick up some of the books that I needed down in a caged area in the basement, in the subterranean vaults of the Epley building.
Yeah. No, things have changed so much.
They really have.
Now, you and your family have spent a lot of time here in Omaha. Much of your working life has been spent here. And in a very personal way, what has the university meant to you? Things that stand out that are a part of that, Bob. You might want to reflect on that a little bit, if you would.
Well, I think, first of all, it has given me an opportunity to grow as a teacher and administrator. That has been a very significant thing in my life. I think perhaps that's one of the reasons I came to UNO, was the fact that there was a potential here for personal, professional development. Secondly, the university has given me an opportunity to work out into the community, because one of our activities that we're expected to fulfill is service to the community. And I've had a very strong relationship with the opera company, Opera Omaha. I've served on its board of directors for almost 10 years. I'm no longer on the board, however. Served as its secretary. I chaired its search committee for a new general director. I've served as their chorus master. I've directed their program of, what do we call it, the Young People's Opera Program, in which we took programs into the schools. So I've served in a number of capacities with the company, and right now in retirement I'm serving as their director of archives.
So you've had a full life.
Yes.
In a variety of areas.
That's right. But the university has really been the catalyst in bringing this about.
And an open public university like this that relates so well to the community gives us that opportunity, doesn't it?
That's right. Exactly.
When are you going to really retire, Bob?
I don't know. I hope never. Really, that is, if we think of retirement as sitting, rocking in a chair, and watching television, or just doing nothing, so to speak, I don't think I could ever follow that kind of course.
That's good to hear. But you sound like so many of my friends who have retired. They're busy people.
Yes, that's right.
And that's a wonderful
Everyone
thing.
I talk with who is retired says the same thing.
Well, I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for being with me as we sat down to chat this beautiful afternoon in early October. And we wish you the best in the months and years ahead to you and your family.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
We've been reflecting for about the last hour on the life and times and relationship with the University of Dr. Robert Ruetz, a member of our music faculty and College of Fine Arts for so many years. And we hope you'll enjoy this tape and many others in our series now of Reflections in Time.